Let me take this thing off so you can understand what I'm saying. Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Nathan Talks. You probably know what this talk is going to be about. I haven't made one for quite a few months. And a few months ago, when the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic was just getting started, we made some videos about that. And now that we're about 3 or 4, 5 months into it, I've got a few things I want to share. The last video I made a few weeks ago, I said that I wasn't going to make a lot of videos unless I really sensed a strong stirring in my spirit, and that I felt that I had a mandate from Elohim to give a message about something. And this message I'm about to give has been stirring in my heart for a number of weeks, and now it is time to release it. And I'm entitling it The COVID Pandemic and the Flood of Deceptive Words. I've been sitting back for weeks and weeks and weeks and months watching, kind of like a watchman on the wall, watching, observing, praying. And some things have come to kind of resonated and moved up in my awareness, in my spirit. And that's what I want to share with you today. There is so much confusion, so much misinformation, so much contradictory information coming from so many sources and it's resulting in a great deal of fear among many people, if not most people. And this isn't just in one country, this is across the world. Now, I can't speak about what's going on in other countries, but I can certainly speak about what's going on in the United States because I'm here. And I want to talk about that. 2,000 years ago, Yeshua the Messiah made two interesting prophetic predictions about conditions that would exist in the end times on earth just prior to his second coming. The first one we read is in Matthew 24:37, where Yeshua said, and is a very famous quote that many of you know, "For as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man." And then Yeshua speaking through John the Revelator in the book of Revelation. This is a little bit less of a common passage, but equally enigmatic. It's speaking about Satan the devil, likening him to a serpent, and this is in Revelation 12:15. "So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood." And the woman here is a picture of the bride of Yeshua, the bride of Messiah, the saints, basically. What did Yeshua mean by these predictions, and what do they have to do with the COVID pandemic that is currently sweeping across the world, bringing confusion, fear, and destruction in its wake? Let's now explore this interesting and question to find out what our reactions need to be in light of the flood of words that is spewing forth from countless sources related to this pestilence. And that's what this little talk is going to be about, and who we should be listening to and what our reactions should be. Now, we live in the so-called information age. We have information coming at us from a multiplicity of sources. I mean, I've got a device here called a cell phone that I can plug into all the information of the world, and I can plug into thousands, if not millions, of sources of information. And I can get that information instantly. When I was growing up, we basically had three sources of information. The printed word. That, let's say, when I say information, I'm talking about current news information about what was going on in the world. So we basically had three sources. We had the printed word, newspapers and magazines. Then we had the electronic or electromagnetic, the radio for our news, and television. And I remember growing up, my family were kind of news addicts. I grew up in an old farmhouse, and my dad would, every morning he'd be up at 5 o'clock, and I would hear, my room was in the attic of this old farmhouse that my grandfather built, and it was just above the kitchen. And I'd hear at 5 o'clock, my dad would have the news on. He'd be listening to the news every morning down in the kitchen as he's getting his breakfast ready. And I remember the Oregonian newspaper, the Oregon's biggest daily newspaper, would be delivered by about 5 o'clock in the morning at the paper box at the end of our driveway. And my dad would go down and get that, and it would be laying on the table when I'd get up in the morning, and there it would be. And that was the source of information. And of course, the first thing I went to were the comic page, we called it the funnies. I was an addict of the funnies, and I'd read those every single day. But we would read the news, and that was the newspaper, and that was our source of information. Eventually, many years later, I ended up becoming a reporter for the Oregonian and worked for them as a news writer. But that was during my college days. And I remember growing up, I'd have the radio going when I would be out working. When I wasn't in school, I'd be working in the family business. And I'd listen to Paul Harvey News at 12 o'clock every day. The famous, iconic, legendary Paul Harvey, the midday news. And then at 5 o'clock, I'd listen to Lowell Thomas, World News Roundup. I think he was on the CBS network. And Lowell Thomas was the one that made Lawrence of Arabia famous, and he had been on the radio since, he was a news reporter back during World War I. He'd been around forever. And then every night, like religious clockwork, we would listen to Uncle Walter, the CBS Evening News, Walter Cronkite. Every single night, we never missed it for anything. And I grew up, and that was our source of news. And from that point on, I became kind of a news addict. And now I get my news off the internet. And now there are numerous sources, and even now I get up in the morning and I have about 30 different news sources I keep in touch with, and I look at it in the morning, read the news. We don't have a television anymore. Our family hasn't had television in probably 15 years, but we have the internet. And I'll get it off my computer or off of my iPhone. And I also check in and check the news at the end of the day. So we're living in the information age. And like yesterday, there was a fire in our town, and we saw the big black smoke billowing up. In fact, it's not very far from where I have my yard where I keep all my business equipment. And my wife was concerned that maybe the yard where I keep my equipment, that I rent space, was up in flames because it was coming from that area. So she went on an app on her iPhone and pulled up the local an app from the local fire district, the fire department, and found there was an aerial of it, and it showed exactly where the fire was, and it was about a quarter of a mile from my yard, so our yard was safe. But you can get this information instantly. This is instant information. Now this can be a good thing, but it can also be a very confusing thing because there is no end to it, and it literally can keep your head spinning. And you have this news source saying one thing and that news source saying something completely different, and this news source saying this, and so much of the news nowadays. Now, I studied to be a journalist, okay? I studied journalism at 3 different institutions of education. I was the editor of our high school newspaper. I studied journalism for 3 years in high school. I studied journalism at 2 university journalism schools, and I was going to go and become a journalist and get a master's degree in journalism at a top-rate journalism school. And my career path took me in another directions, and I didn't go into that field. But I wrote for several newspapers and a magazine or 2 and other things before I launched into other business areas. So I understand journalism, and what is being put off on us as journalism today by the major news media is not what I learned and what we were taught in journalism school. It's not fair and balanced by and large. It's not objective reporting. It's more like editorializing, full of hearsay, full of anonymous reporting, anonymous sources, full of lies, slander, libel, people's opinions. The news is slanted, generally in a leftist direction. It is many important news events are ignored, and many unimportant news events are championed and put out as the major news events. Our news is controlled to one degree or another, especially at a national, international level. And we are not told the whole truth, and it's not objective. It's not like what we were taught, what I was taught in the several journalism schools that I studied at. And to be honest with you, I am just literally sick and fed up with the news. It engenders confusion and fear. And it is biased, and it is contradictory, and you have all different experts saying different things on everything, and people are confused and don't know what to believe. So I stopped listening to the radio a long time ago. I stopped listening. I can't take the advertisements. We haven't had a TV for, like I say, 15 years. And I'm to the point now where I almost don't listen. For years I've listened to news talk shows, podcasts as I'm working, and I don't even want to listen to that anymore. I mostly listen to music and audiobooks. I'm not a troglodyte. I'm not burying my head in the sand. I still follow the news, but I'm not following it as intensively. Why is this? Because there's something inside of me, in my spirit, man, that's rising up and saying no, not out of ignorance, but out of revulsion. And this latest thing, the coronavirus, or the COVID-19 so-called pandemic, this sweeping across the world, and I don't deny that there's an issue with it. I'm not one of these people that's in denial. But I have literally, the way things are being spun, and the misinformation and the contradictory information, and this government official says that, and that government official says something opposite, and this person, this doctor, this medical expert, everybody's got an opinion, and I'm seeing people all around me confused, like what is going on, and people don't know what to think. And it's engendering all kinds of questions. And this is causing my view about the news sources that I'm just getting sick of them. And some I trust more than others, but even then, it's hard to know who to trust. It's hard to know who to trust. Who do you trust? What do you believe? And people are asking themselves questions like, with regard to just this one issue, the COVID-19 virus, they're asking themselves questions, and there's debates, and people are angry and vitriolic against each other about these issues. Does wearing a mask help or harm a person? How contagious is this disease? How does it really spread? Are as many people really dying as they are telling us? Are they dying from other causes that are being counted as COVID deaths to inflate the numbers? What is the real death rate? How many people are actually recovering? What is the morbidity rate? Which experts do you listen to? Can you trust, since so many of them are contradicting each other? Will a vaccine help or hurt a person? How effective will it be? Why are whole economies being shut down because of COVID and people's businesses and lives being ruined? Why are healthy people being quarantined instead of just the infectious and sick people? Why are those pushing the vaccines also those who stand to profit the most financially from these vaccines? Where should I go? What activities are safe for me to do or not do? Is this whole COVID thing a fulfillment of end-time Bible prophecies about plagues, wars, and famines? Is this pandemic a satanic New World Order, Babylon the Great plot to depopulate the planet? Could forced vaccines lead to the mark of the beast implant mentioned in Revelation 13? Are the big pharmaceutical companies, along with various governments, pushing for vaccines a fulfillment of the Revelation 18 prophecy about the famous pharmakeia or drug sorcery prophecy of Revelation 18 verse 23? Now, these are all questions that many people have, including Bible students who see the end-time prophecies and wonder if this could be the beginning of a fulfillment of this. I don't know what you do in light of all this, but I'll tell you what I do. I turn to the Bible. The government doesn't have the answers. The World Health Organization doesn't have the answers. The Chinese government is lying. I don't know if I can trust the World Health Organization. They've proven to be liars and misrepresenting information. I don't know if I can trust the National Institute of Health. I don't know if I can trust the talking heads up there, standing representing the government. You got all these experts saying different things. Who do you turn to? Who do you believe? That's when I turned to the Word of Elohim, the Word of God, the Rock of Ages, the Bible. You say, what does the Bible have to say about this? Well, we're going to talk about this. Let me just say that when everything around us doesn't look good, when the outlook looks bad, that's when it's time to look up. That's when it's time to draw close to the source of all knowledge and information. That's when it's time to seek to be quiet, to quiet down the mind, the will, and the emotions of your soul, and to pull back and to listen, to wait patiently on Yehovah, to be quiet and hear the still small voice. That's when it's time to draw close to Yeshua, to spend time on your knees, to learn to hear His voice. We're going to talk about that in the light of this flood of words and ideas and conspiracy theories and opinions and philosophies and everything that's swirling around us like so much effluence in a toilet bowl, to put it in a very crass way. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. Well, nothing in a toilet bowl is good, but you get my point. Let's return to the end-time prophecies that we quoted at the beginning of this little talk. From the book of Revelation, about Satan the serpent spewing water out of his mouth like a flood. What is this prophecy really saying, and what does it have to do with the COVID crisis that's across the world today? In the Bible, water can be a Hebraism for words. Water can be a metaphor for several things in the Bible, but I want to show you that it can be a metaphor for words. Deuteronomy 32, 1 through 2. Quoting Moses in the Song of Moses, it says, "Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching drop as the rain, my speech distill as a dew, as raindrops on the tender herb, and as showers on the grass." Deuteronomy 32, 1 through 2 in the Torah. So here we see that water and rain and dew is a picture of the word of Elohim, of Torah. In Job 29:22, Job says, "After my words they did not speak again, and my speech settled on them as dew. They waited for me as for rain, and they opened their mouth wide as the spring rain." So here Job, I think this is Job speaking, poetically is likening the words of his mouth to dew or to rain. Isaiah the prophet, Isaiah 55, verses 10 through 11. "For as the rain comes down and the snow from heaven, and do not return there, but water the earth, and make it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth." This is Yehovah Elohim speaking. "It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing for which I sent it." Isaiah 55, 10 through 11. John 9, 6. Now this is the Gospel of John. This is where two blind men came up to Yeshua, and they asked him to heal them. And what did he do? When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind men with the clay. This is very interesting. When you really understand what's going on, he's saying that the water that emanates from my mouth, my words, have the ability to heal like water. My word, the water, heal. And he mixed it with clay. There's a whole metaphor there. I'm not going to get into that now. And he anointed with their eyes that they may see. It is the word of Elohim that anoints us to be able to see spiritually. So his word, remember it says in the book of Revelation, out of his mouth comes a sharp two-edged sword which will judge us. His mouth, his word, his waters of life and truth. And then finally, we read in Ephesians 5:26 talking about a husband who is to bathe his wife, if you will, in the water of the word of Elohim. He says that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of the water by the word. So here again, the word of Elohim is likened to water. So from these scriptures we learn that water can be a biblical metaphor for words. We also need to know that there are three sources of words. Three sources. Words from Elohim, from heaven, words from men, and words from Satan. Now let's go back to the words of Yeshua, which are light and truth. And again, as noted earlier, pertaining to the last days prophecy, he prophesied in Matthew 24 that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. So things that were going on while just before the flood, there's going to be parallels between what was going on in that day, and then judgment came and cleansed the earth. Similar things are going to be happening prior to the second coming of Yeshua on this earth, before the judgments of Elohim fall. And then Revelation 12:15. Again, so the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. So this woman is a picture of the saints. And out of the mouth of the serpent, there's flood, water's coming. Now this is symbolic language. And I believe that it's talking about words. Words. And there's never been a time on the planet when there's been more access to information and to words than now. Just in my lifetime, 60 years, we have literally, it's exponentially greater than what I was when I was a kid. And almost everybody has a cell phone. I mean, in Africa, in India, and in the poorest countries, you see people with cell phones. They barely have food to eat or a house, but they've got cell phones. You can see pictures of it. You can talk to people that travel. It's truly amazing. So let's go back quickly and let's look at what was going on in the time of Noah to see what the parallels between Noah's days and these end times are. And see one of the things that Yeshua was talking about when he likened the end times to the days of Noah. So prior to the flood, the Bible says that it rained down from heaven, and the earth opened up its bowels, and water gushed up from below the earth. So we have water that came down from heaven, and water that came up from the earth. Now, Noah had been preaching for 120 years. He was a preacher of righteousness, as it says in, I think it's in 2 Peter. Anyway, I think one of Peter's epistles, either 1st or 2 Peter. And so he was preaching the word of Elohim. Water was going forth from his mouth. He was preaching the words of Elohim. But then judgment came, and that water came down from heaven, but also the earth opened up. Now, when Moses was preaching the word of Elohim, humans were mocking and scorning him. They were jeering at him. Nobody listened to him. He was building an ark. Nobody had seen rain. Nobody had seen a flood. And he was building an ark, a boat, and people thought it was a joke before rain even existed. But Noah was ahead of his time. He listened to the words of Elohim, and he built this ark. And the only people that listened to Noah were his family members. There were 8 of them that were on the ark. And so all the rest of the people in the world perished in the flood. So we had water that came down from heaven. So that was Noah preaching. I mean, it's a type of that. And then the people did not listen. So water came down from heaven and judged the people. It saved Noah, for he floated on the water. But judgment, the word of Elohim came down and judged the earth and judged the people. But at the same time, water came up from below. The source of below is the devil, the world, the flesh. You have this clash. If we use that metaphor, we have the clash of water from above and water from below. And when the gospel is preached, the word of Elohim goes forth like water, the forces of darkness, the forces of hell are going to oppose that and fight that. And that's exactly what happened. There was a clash, and literally it caused destruction on the face of this earth. In the last stage, knowledge shall be increased, and the devil shall spew out of his mouth deceptive words or philosophies like a flood in an effort to spiritually drown the world and even the saints through deception. Yeshua talks about even the saints might be deceived, even the very elect in Matthew 24, I think is verse 14. Water can also be a judgment against men, as I said. Yehovah will judge men for their words, philosophies, and religions. Those who followed Yehovah's word from heaven will be spared his wrath, while those who have subscribed to the words or philosophies of men from below will perish or be judged in the sea of men's words that are often founded on the doctrines of demons. Those who feed spiritually from the tree of the knowledge will die, while those who feed from the tree of life, or the word of Yeshua, and Noah was a picture of Yeshua, the preacher of righteousness, the preacher of Torah, will live. Yeah, it was 2 Peter 2:5 where Noah is called a preacher of righteousness, and we see that righteousness is defined as Torah. Psalm 119, 172. So in the last days, the word of Jehovah will judge men, for when Yeshua returns to the earth on his white war stallion, the sword of the word of Elohim will be coming out of his mouth, with which he will judge the nations. Revelation 19, 11 through 15. So the question that I want to ask you, and each of us needs to ask ourselves, is whose words are you going to listen to? The words that are coming up from below, or the words that are coming from down from above? The word of men, of the world, the flesh, and the devil, or the word of Elohim and his spirit, the spirit of Elohim, the Ruach HaKodesh? As for me and my household, we're going to listen to the word of Elohim. And I am tired of listening to the world, the flesh, and the devil with all of its deceptions and all of its wickedness, the twisting of the truth, the fake news, the twisted news, the unreported news, the promotion of perversions, the promotion of fear, of lies, the promotion of everything that is evil, secular humanism, Marxism, evolution, abortion, homosexuality, leftism, the Babylon the Great New World Order, one worldism. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Now, this is feeding from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yes, we have to be aware of what's going on, but let's not feed from that tree. Think of the serpent, the snake in a tree. Elohim gave his word to Adam and Eve, and the serpent or the snake in a tree gave out words that were both good and evil, but the evil caused them to sin and distract them away from the truth and the word of Elohim, and they sinned, and that's why we're in the mess that we're in to this day. The words of Satan are smooth and deceptive and alluring. There's enough good in there to draw people in and to deceive them and get them distracted off of the word of Elohim. I don't want to feed from that tree. It's lethal. It's a lethal dose of evil. Yes, I have to separate the good from the evil, but that's not primarily who I'm going to listen to determine what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go and how I'm going to what I'm going to say. I want to feed from the tree of life, where all the words are good and are pure and are truth with a capital T. And that's why I turn to the Bible. That's why I quiet my frantic, confused spirit down and focus on Yeshua, my Lord and Savior. Focus on the word of Elohim. Focus on the Spirit who will lead us into all truth with a capital T, and will show me where to go, what to do, what not to do, how to act, what to say, who to hang out with, and so on and so forth. We read in the Epistle of James, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in meekness of wisdom." And then James goes on to discuss two sources of wisdom, two sources of truth. "But if you have bitter envy self-seeking in your hearts, and do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. The world, the flesh, and the devil. That's this wisdom, the knowledge, the truth, the news, the understanding that comes from below, that gushes up out of the earth, out of the dark recesses of the earth. It's not that news, that truth, that light that comes from above. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. For where envy and self-seeking and confusion and every evil thing are there. This is the news, the majority of the news that is coming out from our major news sources is engendering confusion, strife, bitter envying, division, contention, and fear. We judge things by its fruits, and the fruits are not good, and that's why I am tired and fed up with, and can't take it anymore, of spending so much time listening to the news. If there was such a thing as Newsaholics Anonymous, I'd probably go there and stop being an addict. In fact, I have diminished my news viewing and reading substantially. Yes, I keep up with what's going on and only go into those things that I feel led that I need to go deeply into, but I am wanting to spend more time with things that edify and build up than engender confusion, strife, and fear. So that's the wisdom that James talked about that comes from below, or that comes from below. But the wisdom, he goes on to say, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, and gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. That's the wisdom that I want. That's what brings peace and joy. That's what brings strength and life, as it says in 2 Timothy 1:7, for Elohim has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. That's the camp I want to camp in. Dear brothers and sisters, saints of the Most High, followers and disciples of Yeshua the Messiah, now, more than ever, is the time to go deeper into your relationship and walk with Yeshua the Messiah through the Spirit of Elohim in accordance with His written word. Now is the time to learn to hear the voice of Yeshua. Now is the time to hear Him speaking through His word, to hear the Spirit, as Yeshua said, the Comforter, the Paraclete, that He would send, that He has sent, that those who are born again and filled with the Spirit have, to guide and direct them. Where Yeshua said in John 14, 15, and 16, in through there, in about 4 or 5 different places, that the Spirit would lead us into all truth, show us things to come, reveal to us, and recall and remind us of what Yeshua has said, and would comfort us and strengthen us along the way. That is the source and the power we need to be relying on. And we need to fast and to pray and get on our knees and get in the Word and get in tune with these things. Because it's getting dicey out there. It's getting confused out there, and we need to stop being part of that confused rabble and disengage, because we are what we eat. The more we listen to this, the more we will be confused. And I'm not saying, again, I got to reiterate, I'm not saying don't listen to the news. Don't listen to what other people are saying. But do not make that your primary focus. I'm reminded of what Proverbs says in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. Trust in Jehovah with all your heart, and lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear Yehovah and depart from evil. And then in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 27, Yeshua speaking, he says, my sheep hear my voice. He's the good shepherd. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. They know my voice. They hear him. He knows who his are. Brothers and sisters, the elect of the Most High, the redeemed of Yeshua, those who have been bought by the blood of Yeshua, whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The takeaway from this little talk is this. Who are you going to listen to? Who are you going to follow? Who is going to determine how you think, what conclusions you come to, how you evaluate all that is going on around here? Everything going on in the world. Are you going to be whipsawed all over the place, like a cork on the ocean, like a wind, wind in the waves, or wind in a cloud in the wind, tossed to and fro, with every doctrine of men, every philosophy, everything that's running around out there? Or are you going to have your feet built on the foundation, on the solid rock of truth, the solid rock of Yeshua? And you're not going to fall prey to all the stuff going on out here. And you not only are not going to fall prey, but you're going to have the ability to separate, to judge righteous judgment, as it says in John chapter, 5:24? I think it's 7:24. Judge righteous judgment, and in Matthew 7, to judge things by their fruits, and to critically analyze and discern right from wrong, truth from error, good from evil, so that you know what to do. Well, if you're going to be locked in with Yeshua, you know his word, and you're walking in the light. We're not children of the darkness, carousing and being drunk with the wine of this earth, the wine of fornication with this earth, where people are being drunk on the lies of Babylon the Great, the harlot system, but are solidly entrenched and brainwashed, if you will, by the word of Elohim, where we can see correctly and straight and forward and where we're supposed to go. You're not going to be moved. You're going to be at anchor and solid. Which voice are you going to listen to? That's a choice that each one of us has to make. And we have to make the determination and have the volition to pursue that voice, to seek that voice, to hear that voice, and to sharpen our hearing so that we know his word and know his voice, so that we will know what to do, what to say, how to think, how not to think, what to believe, what not to believe. And he will guide and direct us, protect us, and we will stay under the shadow of his wings, and he will guide and direct us with his eye, as it says in Psalm 18. I hope this has been a blessing to you. Think about it. Meditate on it. I've given you the word and the truth of Elohim. Now take it and run with it, for the glory of Yehovah Elohim. Amen.